In this lesson, we're going to be taking a high-level look at the issue essay and just what this essay is asking you to do. Let's break it down from the very beginning, the task. So, what exactly is the issue essay? The issue essay will present you with a quotation or statement about a topic that relates to an open-ended issue. And your task is to take a position on the issue and support your position with logic and reasoning. In supporting your position, you want to consider the complexities of the issue and support your logic with evidence that would create a convincing argument for someone who isn't all that knowledgeable about the subject. Think of yourself as the expert on the topic, and your goal as the expert is to convince others that your opinion is the right one. That means the stronger your evidence, reasoning, and organization, the easier it will be to convince others that your position is indeed the correct one. At this point, and especially if you are somewhat familiar with issue essay prompts, you might be wondering if you really need to take one side of the issue. Couldn't you argue both sides? The short answer to that is yes, you can argue both sides. However, arguing both sides tends to add a layer of complexity that you really do not need if you're aiming for a 3 or a 4 or a 5 and maybe even some 6s, but certainly not if your aim is for a 4 or 5. So we recommend going all in on one side. Treat the topic you'll be given in the prompt as a black or white issue because that tends to be easier to develop and it makes it easier to present a counterargument. And writing these essays is already challenging, so if you can make it easier on yourself, think about doing so. In general, the issue essay is persuasive writing. Focusing on one side of the issue will help show your ability to persuade your audience. The evidence you present to support your position will not be fact-checked, and that's great. No one is going to go look up the example you provided to see whether or not it's true. So you can come up with hypothetical examples to support pretty extreme positions. Again, you are the expert. No one is going to doubt you or your position if the evidence you use supports it. Let's talk about the types of general topics you might be asked to take a position on. A really common one is education. You might also see prompts that relate to technology. Leadership and government is another pretty common topic. And arts and society. There are others, of course. If you want to check out the entire pool of issue essay prompts, they are available through the ETS website. Students often wonder if it's a good idea to try to read all of them, and honestly, that is not a great use of your prep time. There are literally hundreds of prompts, so reading all of them is not in your best interest. But you should absolutely scan through some of them and make note of the general area of interest or topic. You will probably find that they typically fall into one of the topic categories we just discussed, but you also might create your own topic buckets and start throwing in other common prompts. So let's take a look at the way those general topics might appear in a few sample prompts. This first one, the role of government is to ensure the safety of the citizens it governs. That is definitely about government responsibilities, so the general topic is government. In this next one, we've got colleges and universities, and they're going to require all students something, blah, 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 internship. This one is clearly about education. And this last one, it's the goal of science, and you also have discovering here. The goal of science is to discover that which is not yet known. This could fall into a couple different categories. It's not that important that we find the perfect category. This might belong to technology. We could also make an argument that it goes well with innovation. Let's continue dissecting the issue essay by talking about the prompt instructions. The phrasing might not always be 100% the same, but all the variations are basically asking you to do the same thing. Write a response in which you explain why you agree or disagree with the presented claim and support your position with evidence. So as you can see in this first one, it directly says, discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree with the claim. And our next example, that has been repackaged, and now it says, discuss which view you more closely which view more closely aligns with your own position. Still asking for your opinion. And this last one, it has been repackaged and says, discuss the extent to which you agree or disagree. Again, pretty straightforward. As you can see, they all pretty much ask you to give your opinion and support it. So you don't really need to worry about what the instructions say. They're always going to be the same. You know what you need to do for this essay. Now we're going to discuss interpreting the prompt. So while the instructions, which we just looked at, for the prompt are a variation on the same theme, the prompt itself is open to interpretation. So let's look at one in greater detail. We saw this one before. The role of government is to ensure the safety of all the citizens it governs. First and foremost, use your imagination. You should feel free to think creatively about the general statement you've been given. Think about ways that you can put your own spin on it. One of the first things to notice is that this prompt uses a number of slippery terms. Slippery terms are words that do not have the same meaning for every person, and that means they can be easy to argue about. For example, think about what makes the best leaders, or even what is leadership. The answers will change depending on someone's personal opinion. The meanings of slippery terms might even change depending on context. In fact, they frequently change depending on context. So think about this. What is true of leadership in the tech industry might not apply to the education industry. Time and location might also change the meaning. What makes for the best leadership in one country in one point in history certainly might not be the same in another country at a different point in history. Furthermore, we aren't limited to real-world examples, which is great. So maybe our example is leadership in The Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, or in an epic Greek or Roman myth. The context in those cases would certainly drastically change the way we interpret a slippery term like leadership. There are a few slippery terms in our prompt, which are safety, citizens it governs, and role of government. What exactly do these slippery terms mean? And the truth is that they don't have an exact meaning. For example, does role mean function or primary purpose? As in, is this just one of many things that the government should do for its citizens, or is it the thing the government should prioritize over every other concern? Does citizens it governs mean anyone within a country's borders? Does it extend to citizens who are also living abroad? So if, for example, you happen to live in another country and you're thousands of miles and many time zones away from your home country, is that home country still responsible for you and whatever trouble you get yourself into? That brings up the question, are there limitations to the government's responsibilities? Are there different contexts for when a government is responsible for you or not, or for its people? Safety, another slippery term. What type of safety? Are we talking about safety of the health of its citizens? Are we talking about the economic safety of citizens? Personal safety? There are a lot of ways we can think about this. And because there are a lot of ways we can think about this, we can use our imagination and capitalize on those slippery terms because they can help us narrow the scope. The prompts and the topics tend to be really broad, and you have a little bit of control here. You can narrow the scope. And what that means is that you can put a different spin on it. So yeah, you have a really general topic like the role of government, but you get to choose how you are going to discuss that role of government. So you are choosing the scope. The slipperiness of the language in the prompt creates an opportunity for you to have control over how you present your position. So you can narrow the scope in a number of ways. One way might be time or location. So you're only going to talk about the role of government at a specific time, or you might only talk about the role of government at a specific location. In the state of the world we're in right now, we could discuss the role of government when there is a pandemic. So that is a particular time in history. How are governments responding and what should governments be doing? We can also think about this in terms of, are there limitations? Is this always the role of government, or are there certain situations that it does apply and other situations in which it does not? Which is the same kind of thing as saying, is it true in some circumstances or is it not true in other circumstances? One of the things to always keep in mind, of course, is that you want to allow yourself to be flexible when choosing your supporting examples. Examples do not have to be real-world viable. That means that fictional governments from books or movies are also perfectly acceptable and can be used to support your position.